Buenos días, mi nombre es Patricia Bárcena y soy adjunta segunda al Defensor del Pueblo. Muchas gracias al Instituto Alemán de Derechos Humanos por la invitación. Es un honor para mí participar en este foro. El Defensor del Pueblo, además del papel tradicional de Ombudsman, alto comisionado de las Cortes Generales, el Parlamento Español, es también Institución Nacional de Derechos Humanos y Mecanismo Nacional para Prevención de la Tortura. Desde esa triple perspectiva, vela por la promoción y defensa de los derechos fundamentales de la ciudadanía, supervisando la actuación de las administraciones públicas y, en su caso, haciendo recomendaciones o propuestas de modificación normativa. En concreto, en el ámbito de la trata de seres humanos, supervisamos que se lleve a cabo una correcta identificación, defensa y protección de los derechos de las víctimas y supervivientes de la trata, a través de la supervisión de las administraciones o las entidades que gestionan los servicios públicos. Tal ha sido el interés de esta institución y su compromiso con la protección de las víctimas de trata, que en el año 2012 elaboró un informe titulado «La trata de seres humanos en España, víctimas invisibles». Este informe realizó un análisis de la realidad de este grave delito, dando voz a las entidades y organismos que trabajan en el ámbito. Además, se abordó la trata de seres humanos en España con un enfoque de derechos humanos y con perspectiva de género, identificando las diferentes formas de trata y trabajando también con víctimas, recogiendo testimonios que permitiesen detectar las carencias, sobre todo en el ámbito de la identificación de las víctimas y identificando posibles vías de actuación para su protección. Desde un principio tuvimos claro que el compromiso no era puntual, que no bastaba con realizar recomendaciones y sugerencias, sino que este era un trabajo a largo plazo. Por eso, una vez presentado el informe ante las Cortes Generales, se ha hecho un seguimiento exhaustivo a través de entrevistas y de supervisión de las recomendaciones realizadas. En octubre del año 2013 se hizo una actualización de dicho informe y desde entonces, a lo largo de estos 10 años, hemos realizado diferentes sugerencias y recomendaciones en los informes anuales, dando muestra de los avances que se han ido alcanzando y de los retos que aún quedan pendientes. Bueno, la coordinación entre los diferentes actores actualmente es fluida, pero no se concretan identificaciones formales y, en consecuencia, en la protección o en una mayor protección a las víctimas. Sobre todo porque actualmente todavía son las fuerzas y cuerpos de seguridad del Estado las que se ocupan exclusivamente de la identificación de las víctimas. Una de las cuestiones más importantes, en nuestra opinión, que necesita revisión profunda, es la reforma de los protocolos de identificación formal de las víctimas de trata en el ámbito concreto de las personas migrantes y, sobre todo, en las fronteras. Migrantes que llegan en situación irregular y, sobre todo, como digo, en las fronteras. Esta realidad, que en principio era alertada solo por la sociedad civil y el Defensor del Pueblo, también ha sido reconocida por la Fiscalía en sus informes anuales y por las administraciones públicas, lo que nos da la esperanza de considerar que quizás en próximas reformas legislativas se lleve a cabo una actualización y, en concreto, una mejora. En opinión del Defensor del Pueblo, existe una necesidad palmaria de superar las resistencias que actualmente existen para que, además de las fuerzas y cuerpos de seguridad del Estado, sean otros agentes, organizaciones de la sociedad civil que trabajan con las víctimas y supervivientes quienes puedan colaborar en la identificación, así sea provisional, de las víctimas y en la mejora, por tanto, de su protección. Un aprendizaje importante creo que ha sido a lo largo de estos años el método utilizado para la elaboración del informe del cual les hablaba. Desde el inicio de la elaboración de este informe se incorporó la voz de la sociedad civil, de los diferentes organismos de las administraciones competentes y se hicieron visitas al terreno y entrevistas a víctimas y supervivientes, que permitieron tener una imagen, un abanico completo de la realidad. La participación de la pluralidad de actores es lo que facilitó enormemente la realización de las recomendaciones. 10 años después podemos decir que las reformas legislativas que actualmente hay en España en marcha, así como los primeros cambios de los protocolos de identificación, han dado respuesta a parte de este trabajo y de estas recomendaciones.
Well, hello, my name is Connie Rijke. I am the Dutch National Rapporteur on Human Trafficking and Sexual Violence Against Children. I took up this position last year in September. The Dutch National Rapporteur is an independent position and supported by an institute that is also independent. The mandate of the National Rapporteur is legally grounded, so it is adopted in a law, and my mandate is also in the law. So it is my task to research the scope and realm of human trafficking and sexual violence against children, to research the effects of the combating of these practices, to advise the government on human trafficking and sexual violence against children, and finally to do a periodically reporting to the Minister of Justice and Security. Well, what is extremely important in the cooperation with the stakeholders is that you know each other, that you know the field, that you're known to all the stakeholders as well. And another important aspect for the identification of victims of trafficking in human beings is awareness raising, so that as many as possible people and organizations know that human trafficking exists and what it is. Because human trafficking can occur everywhere. It can happen, for instance, at school, but also in a hospital, where you can come across a victim, for instance, and also in other places. So it's very important that people are aware of the phenomenon of human trafficking. But also, and in addition to that, it is important that people know what to do with the information. So identification is a first important part, but then the follow-up, who do you send that information to, what is being done with that information, and also that the competent authorities can actually take action based on the identification. Well, what is important for a national referral mechanism is that everybody knows its role in a referral mechanism, but also that the procedures are crystal clear, so that it is determined who takes actions on what moment and what is the next step. So clear procedures and clear roles for everyone involved in a national referral mechanism.
Hello everybody and greetings from Finland. My name is Terhi Tafari and I work for the National Assistance System for Victims of Human Trafficking in Finland. We are a national expert authority on anti-trafficking and responsible for providing assistance to victims of human trafficking. We are also the organization that can formally identify a victim of human trafficking. We are not the only organization offering assistance to victims. NGOs can also provide some good services, as can the regular social and health services. But basically we have the complete package, from safe housing to healthcare and expert advice paid with tax money. But we work with everybody. NGOs who do outreach work can refer victims to us, as can the police, the border guard, the social and health services. We are just about to begin the process of writing down our national referral mechanism, so officially we don't have one yet. First, write down what your organization does and even what it does not do. This, of course, is a basic starting point of mapping out an NRM. But let me give you an example. On a normal day, everything might be going okay. You have time to react to incoming challenges and negotiate with others. But then there's a bigger operation where you have to work together with other actors. For example, us working with 2 NGOs, a group of lawyers and interpreters, the local police force, border guard, and the National Bureau of Investigations. Well, you need to know what everyone does and what they don't do. Everyone knows what their organization does and how they work, and we often assume that everybody else knows what we do as well. We might even find it insulting that they don't know exactly what we do and don't do. But truth is, they don't. They really do not. Fitting different organizations together in an action situation is not the best way to try to do it for the first time. Things go smoother when everyone knows what their task is and what they can rely on others to do. Also, I think simulations will help if you have the opportunity to do some of that. Number 2, you've mapped down what you do and what you don't do. Now tell others. Don't rely on some other organization to do your PR for you. Your country may create a great NRM document where everything you need to know is mapped out, but chances are it will get lost among all the other instructions we have, waiting there for us to really read and study them. Or people might not read it because it's too long or written in difficult language. Make your own leaflets where you tell what you do and spread around that leaflet in organizations, send them email, go visit. And a very important point is to use very simple language, even pictures. For example, don't use long sentences, don't use the passive tense too much. Using simple language, first of all, is inclusive to all people of all abilities to understand and read text, including if you're an immigrant, you need simpler text to function with others. Also, people are more likely to read your brochure and your information if it's written in simple, straightforward language. For example, crisis communication is always done in the simplest language possible because even the most academic linguistic mind is not able to understand normal, general language in a moment of crisis. It's how the brain works. Number 3, people, be civil. You might have the best set out NRM out there, but its working is still dependent on people. A victim may not be referred to us because somebody in some NGO is upset and does not like us. They may have referred somebody to us once upon a time and we didn't accept them as a client, so they might have decided that they'll never work with us again. That's a shame if they encounter a victim that would have actually benefited from our services and they don't get referred because somebody is upset. A secular organization might not want to play with a Christian organization or vice versa, who knows? 10 years ago, we had a big operation with the border guard and mistakes were made on both sides. We were idiots in some aspects, they were idiots in others. And still, 10 years later, there are people who will not cooperate with us because of those mistakes made. Don't be that person. People learn from their mistakes. Acknowledge that mistakes will always be made and that, people will snap at each other in a moment of crisis where you need to act fast and things don't go to plan, they snap. All right, be the person who apologizes if you snap. Be the person who is flexible, who learns from their mistake and still wants to continue cooperating with others. Organize things to do together, for example. Go solve an escape room dilemma somewhere, that's fun. Network outside of work if you can. It's easier to accept that sometimes you might be on different sides of a case if you know that the person on the other side is still okay.
Hello, I'm Andrew Wallace. I'm the CEO of Unseen, a NGO based in the United Kingdom. It's an NGO that works directly with survivors that are identified through the UK's National Referral Mechanism. We currently have about 300 clients in service at any one time. We also run the UK's Modern Slavery Helpline, which is for the public, for victims, for statutory agencies, and for businesses to call if they have concerns or information about potential incidents of trafficking in human beings. We also work with businesses, the major statutory agencies, law enforcement, and we have research and policy based on the work that we do in order to work with government and inform them around policy and legislation. Our role as a member of the National Referral Mechanism is to ensure that victims receive the support, the advice and the guidance that they're entitled to under the definitions of ECAT, the European Convention Against Trafficking. And that can be everything from health to psychological support to access to legal services, whilst the decision is being made around their trafficking status. I think the key message from the UK's experience over, say, the last 15 years is that this is a complex issue that requires all stakeholders in society to work together. So that requires clear communication and trust and understanding between the different stakeholders. But I think the other key component in this, in order to have a successful response to trafficking in human beings, whether that's prosecution, whether that's prevention, or the recovery and the resilience of victims, is actually having what we would call a victim-centric approach, putting the victim at the heart of everything that you do. And that is ensuring that the care and the support that they get is the very best that you can do, that they are treated with respect, and that there is trauma-informed understanding of the issues that they have gone through. And by doing that, what we're beginning to see, and it is only pockets, I wish it was better in the UK, is where we treat victims and survivors really well, where we treat them through a trauma-informed approach, we see a much greater willingness for them to be involved in the prosecution of their traffickers, which is key, and also a much greater willingness to share their experiences so that we have an understanding of how THB occurs, what the drivers are, and what the pull factors are that cause people to end up in situations of exploitation. I think two things. One, and back to my previous point, it has to be a joint creation. I think that is absolutely critical because so many different actors have a role in playing it. I think the second lesson is that make decisions as quickly and as swiftly as possible, that are reliable decisions, and focus your efforts on ensuring that we invest in the resilience of victims, of survivors, so that they are not vulnerable to exploitation or re-exploitation. And I think the third thing, and I think this has been a game changer in the UK, is have a trafficking hotline. So in the UK, it's the Modern Slavery Helpline, but to have a single point of contact for society and for victims to call for help that can then task and route that information or that action that's needed to the various different stakeholders, whether it's law enforcement or it's other NGOs, or it's helping businesses when they discover forced labor within their supply chains.
Greetings from Portugal. My name is Rita Penedo, and since 2013, I am the director of the Observatory on Trafficking Human Beings from the Ministry of Home Affairs. The observatory was created in 2008, set in the framework of the first National Action Plan to prevent and combat trafficking human beings. Currently, Portugal is preparing its fifth national plan, in which the consolidation of the mechanisms for a better identification and protection of victims is expected. The observatory does not have a direct role in identifying victims or ensuring their protection. We are the national monitoring system. Our mission is to produce, collect, analyze, and disseminate information and knowledge, namely statistical, on trafficking human beings. However, and as such, we monitor victims' identification and the type of protection given, and in this sense, we work closely with and are a part of the two national referral mechanisms. The generic mechanism that was created in 2008, as well as specific mechanism aimed at children's victims of trafficking. In the latest years, the observatory has also been quite active in the field of training of frontline professionals, more specifically to law enforcement agencies. These trainings are centered in two main dimensions, one on the indicators to flag presumed victims and on the harmonized procedures for a quicker assistance and protection to the victims. I would like to highlight 4 interconnected dimensions. Firstly, the establishment of harmonized indicators and procedures of communication designed with and for the relevant stakeholders, a bottom-up approach. Secondly, the training and its evaluation, measure the efficiency, effectiveness, and impact. Thirdly, the connaissance for the application of all relevant legal instruments in what concerns victims' rights. And fourthly, trust between all the main stakeholders, governmental, non-governmental, and intergovernmental, in the sense that although respecting their different missions and scope of intervention, the primary and final objective must be to flag and to identify victims, to assist and protect them, upholding their legal rights, and to fight and dismantle trafficking networks or even isolated traffickers. On lessons learned, firstly, that it's not a fixed manual or procedures. For instance, the generic mechanism that was developed in 2008, it was revised in 2014 in a response to a series of events that took place in Portugal during 2013, trafficking in labor exploitation in the agriculture sector with hundreds of victims. And that showed some gaps in some procedures and communications between the main frontline professionals. No communication or overlapping of communication. The revision at the time also considered the new trends of trafficking in Portugal, for a prevalence of sexual exploitation in the first years of monitoring to labor exploitation. And it also enabled the adaptation of procedures to the legislative and institutional changes. Secondly, and recalling the National Referral Mechanism on Children, which manual was coordinated by the Observatory, the following important steps: setting up a multidisciplinary working group, establishing what contents are relevant nationally, to be more than a manual, that is, one needs to promote an institutional incorporation and commitment. How? By establishing the mechanism assessment as far as its effective implementation and respective monitoring. As such, the mechanism foresees the nomination of a focal point in each entity of the working group, the internal dissemination and tailor-made training actions, holding at least one annual meeting with the representatives of the working group and representatives of other organizations if it's considered relevant, and to elaborate an annual report evaluating the effectiveness, impact, and efficiency of the mechanism. This analysis will help to know how the mechanism is responding to the needs and to identify possible revisions and/or adaptations. To conclude, a national step forward was the inclusion of the mechanism in a law, making it compulsory by stating that the national authorities that are responsible for surveillance, monitoring, and border control shall take the appropriate steps to identify and refer children, but also vulnerable adults, to the competent services, namely those within the national referral mechanisms, and more specifically, the National Mechanism on Child. Many thanks, and I wish you all a wonderful and productive conference.